your podcast app. You'll see there's a discourse happening. Is this book a masterpiece or problematic? One's a lifelong diehard fan, the other's a first-time reader. Both are really smart and funny and attractive. Sweet feather, sweet feather, talking twins and hierarchy. Sweet feather, sweet feather, relentless focus on their body. Sweet feather, sweet feather, what do they mean by all American? Sweet feather, sweet feather, no sex, just titillation.
She cried to the southern wind about a love that would shoot you in.
How much of this do we need?
Dreaming
No, more. This is the mood right now. I need you to just open yourself up.
Showdown.
We're gonna ease into this.
Bad dreamer, what's your name? Looks like we're riding on the same train. Looks as though there'll be more pain. It's gonna be a showdown.
I've never heard this song before.
And it's a rain.
All right, we can make it. That's it. Just the showdown. I have no analysis. I just wanted us to listen.
Have
Because
you?
you know what? It made me move my shoulders.
Is it a song you know, or did you just Google songs called Showdown?
I Googled songs called Showdown, and then when I listened to it, I was like, I do know this song. Because I did know that there was a song called Showdown, and then I recognized it. So it's both. You know, as we often say, it's both and.
It's always both and.
And sometimes we know and we Google.
Sometimes we know and we Google.
Sometimes I just love to have it out. It's just something a girl's gotta do. Never thought I'd see you like this. You're looking good when you're half dressed. Just let me give you one last test.
You know this song.
Is that a sin? Am I too hot for you though? Did you check out my
I mean, I of course recognize who it is, but I don't think I actually know this song.
You might know the pop. We'll wait for the
Was it like a single that I
Take you
didn't
to
know?
stand in my way. Just give in when you are ready to play.
I don't think I know it, but I love it. Both and. I don't know it and I know
Here
it.
comes the showdown. What goes around comes around. And the crowd's all waiting.
Was that her referencing Justin after he did that song up here? When she said what goes around comes around?
Check my body out.
Oh, wow.
That's right.
It must be. So this is
God.
from In the Zone in 2003.
Never forget when Justin Timberlake was on SNL and he played on the piano that song Goes Around Comes Around, and he was freaking out of his seat, okay, vibing. And I just want to say I am guilty, and I must confess, Father, that at the time I found him extremely appealing, and I did at the time enjoy that performance. And if I watched it now, I would be throwing knives at the television saying
Great.
demon, 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 demon,
Great.
demon, 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 demon.
Great.
And we're all on a journey. How are you?
We're all on a journey. I'm good. My journey's kind of moving forward, which is nice.
You know, for me, this one was a simmerer. This one simmered.
Tell me more about that.
Like sometimes I read it, and as I'm reading it, I'm experiencing all the kind of wow moments.
Hmm.
Sometimes it has to simmer over a couple days.
Yeah.
Anyway, with this one, I don't know. As the days went by, I started to say maybe there's some layers here.
Okay. I'm really curious to explore those layers because I had a.
I might be overstating here. I think there's like one layer, which I guess would just be called a noodle.
So it's not lasagna, is what you're saying.
No, it's one noodle.
Okay, it's a noodle.
Give me your Showdown review, 6 words.
Guys still suck. No surprise there.
Wow, but that okay. My reaction to that, I'm just sort of processing this. I'm like, yeah, I received this. I agree with you. Yes, but I feel like this book was that, but also so much more, like fascinating stuff.
Okay.
Okay, my 6-word review.
Keep in mind, I only had 6 words.
True. Okay, my 6-word review, can it be 7?
I mean, you've shown in the past that you refuse to be fettered by numerical counting systems. So I say whatever you think is best.
What percent? I said is 2 words and not one, or I said it's 1, not 2. Come on. Okay, here's my 6-word review.
Listeners, please know that she is holding up 7 fingers. She recounted her words, held up 7 fingers, and then went, here's my 6-word review.
The horse doesn't know it's a race.
Ooh. The horse doesn't know it's a race.
And I'm just going to go ahead and say it, okay? For me, the craziest thing about this book is it's called Showdown. It is not a showdown. Lila doesn't know it's happening, okay? Jessica is secretly, literally Lila in her own, in terms of what the book is supposedly about, in terms of at the level of plot, okay? And let me just say it, at the level of plot, Jessica and Lila, unbeknownst to Lila, but knownst to Jessica, are dating the same guy, okay? And he has a mysterious path, and we'll figure out what it is. His name's Jack, okay? And part of the reason this was one of those books where when I see the title, it's impossible for me to remember what it's about, is because the title does not describe what it is about. To me, the instant interpretation I have of the word showdown is this is an explicit competition, right? Where people are aware of and acknowledging they are in such a showdown, okay? This book is not that. This book is like a covert thing where Lila doesn't find out about the showdown till literally the last chapter of Jessica's at knife point, is when Lila finds out over the phone.
Spoiler alert, by the way.
So, well, we do plot summary at the beginning, so we're obviously going to spoil. But so, like, this isn't a showdown. It's a crazy title, which then we can ask some questions. But that's just something I got to say out the gate. And that's what I mean by the horse doesn't know it's a race, which is one time in college, one of my fucking roommates had on this terrible show called Man vs. Beast. And I don't know if you ever watched it, but...
No. I side with the beast, I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah. You know, thinking about it, I'm sure it's very offensive and problematic and bad. But basically the premise of the show was like humans doing athleticism compared to animals. Okay. And I watched one of the episodes was a man versus a horse who can run fast. And for these competitions, they had these sort of stats graphics that they would put up.
I have seen this, or at least screenshots from this. This sounds very familiar.
And so they'll be like, you know, the height, weight, pounds, whatever. And then they'll be like strengths, weaknesses. And I remember they like showed the one for the person and they're like, it's this. And then they showed the one for the horse and they're like, it's this tall, it weighs this much, it's this old, it can run this fast. And then it was like strengths, like, I don't know what. And then I said weaknesses, doesn't know it's a race. And Robert, that imprinted on me.
Clearly.
Just because it was so funny. I laughed so hard when I saw that. I've never laughed so hard in my life as when I saw that, because it's so funny, because it's like the whole rest of that graphic and all the information on it was like taking seriously this whole exercise as if these things can be compared and just like listing the numbers and listing the facts, right? And then you get to the horse's weaknesses and it says, doesn't know it's a race. Like you could take that on the level of like, okay, so, for example, if someone says go, is it going to know it should go? Or whatever. But it's so profound. And Lila is that horse in this book. Okay? And by the way, you're going to see what I just said reflected in the cover image.
I do want to say there are moments where it does feel like Lila does know there's a showdown happening. At the pool party, there are definitely moments where I think Lila is more of a human, less of a horse. But there are definitely moments when Lila is just a horse who does not know it's a race. Also, that is still so the horse doesn't know it's a race. So very funny to me.
You know, you're going to be surprised by this, but I agree with you.
Oh, I'm always surprised when you agree.
No, but so, and here's where the complexity and the interesting and the maybe it is a good name comes in, right? Which is this particular quote unquote battle over Jack, which the book would have us believe this book is about. Is not a showdown in the sense that Lila doesn't know it's happening, I think. But it is a showdown in the sense that when I Googled the word showdown, part of the meaning I got was that it's sort of like a final battle between a long simmering conflict. It's like it's a, for example, like say it's like the two last presidential candidates. And so I think like, to me, it's very clear in this one that Jessica's pursuit of Jack is absolutely not about Jack, and that she decides to do it in a reactive way to other things that have happened in previous books. And so I think that like this quote unquote battle over Jack is then a showdown in the sense that there is this foundational underlying rivalry between Jessica and Lila that for Jessica explicitly is coming to a head in this quote unquote fighting over Jack. But I think, as you said, Lila is clearly participating in a conflict with Jessica. Even at the very end of this book, we get no even sort of conversation about between Jessica and Lila, like even acknowledging that it happened. So it's very interesting.
It is definitely interesting. Do we want a cliffhanger from the book before, or do we not even need it?
I mean, I guess we should explain who Jackie is, how she met him, all that stuff.
Okay. So Lila has been going to her dad's construction site, and there is a construction worker there who is older, so like 18 or 19, and hot. And there's something about him that just doesn't seem like a construction worker. He makes some literary references. He talks about doing fancy things. And so Lila is interested in him. Lila is talking to Jess about him. In the last book, Lila and Jess had a bet over whether Regina and Bruce would stay together. Because Lila lost the bet, she had to write 2 term papers, her term paper and Jess's term paper. She did a shitty job on Jess's term paper, and Jess got a D. Jess is super, super upset. And then Lila says, "Oh, I'm going to go see Jack. I'm telling you, he's fabulous." Jessica stared at her, the sparkle coming back to her blue-green eyes. "Tell me more about him," she said impulsively. Her face brightening, Lila leaned forward, launching into a lengthy description of Jack's charms, and Jessica listened avidly. It had just occurred to her that Lila might need a dose of her own medicine, and maybe, if Jessica could get to know this Jack character herself, she might be able to get that smirk off Lila's face for good.
We're told explicitly that this Jack thing for Jessica is motivated by hurting Lila. And if I can just build on something.
Please, build.
Jessica is salty at this point because she got screwed over with the term paper thing and lost the bet. And because of the deeper things that represents through that for her, which is that like the bet she lost is Bruce and Regina staying together or breaking up. And Bruce and Regina staying together is something that is very, very hurtful for her and is experienced as like a rejection from Bruce. Like, right. Plus, I think a really, really key moment in the last book was when Lila rubbed salt in Jess's wound, where it was like it said Lila knew that a sore spot for Jess was that Bruce didn't want to spend time with her. And she specifically says that Bruce wants to spend every second with Regina. I think like part of what Jessica's coming to this book with is that. And also I think what is very interesting is that either in the last book or a couple books ago, maybe it was actually love letters because it was when she was at her dad's office, but she randomly bumped into Dennis.
Of course.
So for our listeners who may not recall, Dennis was the guy that she had this sort of short-lived romance with when she was temping at her dad's office. But then when she found out he was 15, she dumped him. But it was made pretty clear that like, and we talked about at the time that like, at the same time, she was teasing Lila that Lila could never date Roger because he's poor. And, you know, they can't date someone without a car. So, of course, she can't date someone who's 15 because what would Lila think? And so we have been getting a sense that the two of them have this, I think, building resentment of this sort of bind that they put each other in. And so I think the fact that Jessica, in one of the last couple books, had a very, very benign and pointless encounter with Dennis when she was at her dad's office. And it was literally just like she saw him at the elevator. They said, "Hi, how are you? Pretty good. How are you?" She left, was thinking about something else. Literally, there was no point. It goes nowhere. And so in my view, I'm thinking, okay, well, I think that's also kind of then really useful as a reminder to Jess of something she couldn't have that she wanted that can now add to her sort of motivation in a showdown.
Intriguing. Shall we do the plot summary and then the couvert?
Yeah. We haven't summarized the plot yet. Jeez. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So Jess and Lila are fighting over Jack, who is a mysterious guy that several characters seem to kind of not totally be able to place because he is ostensibly a construction worker, but he is very posh and well-dressed and makes literary references. And he looks kind of familiar to Nick Morrow. And then we finally find out that he went to prep school with Nick and Nick's friend, but got expelled from prep school, has been stealing, has robbed a previous girlfriend. He holds Jessica at knife point, and then Todd and Nicholas rescue her. That's A. You want to hit me with the B? What is the B plot? I don't even know.
The B plot is freaking the plane lesson people. Okay, the B plot is there's a phantom photographer submitting excellent photographs to the Oracle, but won't say their name and must remain a secret. And Liz says, but they're so good, I wish I knew whose they were. And Penny Ayala has freaking mono and is at home. So Liz is temporarily taking over as interim editor-in-chief, which is giving her an absolute meltdown. And she finds these phantom photographs, and through the phantom photographs, she sees a picture of, guess what?
Huh?
George, what's his name? George
Wallace? No, George Wallace is a person. George something with a W, right?
Well, it's Robin Wilson and George, whatever. George, Enid's boyfriend, okay, who we know has been taking flying lessons. There's a picture of George making out with former fatty never forget Robin Wilson, who is also taking flying lessons, and they are making out together, which means he is cheating on Enid, famously the best friend of Liz, which gives Liz a heart attack. She goes to try to confirm it. She confirms they're cheating. She's not happy, and in the end, Enid and George are up in a plane. He says he's about to tell her, and we get something on the intercom at the police station says, "Mayday, Mayday!" George and Enid in a plane, man down.
Perfect. I had totally forgotten about the Tina Ayala of it all. Tina is Penny's little sister, who is the phantom photographer. What are you laughing at?
You'd never believe they were sisters, because one had blonde hair and was normal skinny, and the other has brown hair and freckles and is absolutely plump. It's plump to the gods. Okay.
Mama.
Do you want to get the taglines?
Has Lila finally met her match? Who will win Jack's heart?
Oscars, Oscars, who will win?
It's a wonderful night for Oscar, Oscar, Oscar. Who will win? The 5 films nominated for Best Picture are.
And what's my last guess? Is all truly fair in Love and War?
Not correct, but that those were absolutely
adequate.
No, I was gonna say they were like exemplary.
Oh, thank you.
They should be aspired to, those guesses.
It's very kind. It's very, very kind of you to say.
No, on the front we have Jessica and Lila are in love with the same boy! Exclamation mark.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Sometimes it's like we just overthink it.
Yeah.
On the back, more than she bargained for, ...
Clear your schedule.
Not clear your schedule, but there's some stuff to be said.
I mean, who's the she?
Right. That's the main thing to be said.
I mean, there are a couple. Oh.
Well, then we gotta talk about the bargoon of it all, but
thank you.
Of course. But yeah,
listeners may not know that I pronounce the word bargoon.
Yeah, Robert famously says the word bargoon, and because of that, my mom will always be like, even when we weren't even in touch anymore in that like weird dark period, the dark ages.
Never speak of it. Okay.
My mom would be like, bargoon, like your friend Robert used to say. I mean, okay, when my first reading of More Than She Bargained For was talking about Jessica, because she's the one who gets a knife to her throat at the end.
Agreed.
And I think we can also say that Lila got a little more than she bargained for. I mean, her dad's cufflinks got stolen, and it wasn't how she hoped.
Bargains are trades and barters. Oh, bargoons, sorry, are trades and barters. And this idea that she is like entering into the commerce of love and romance and sex, and what she offers is taken, and what she gets in return is not what she thought she was going to get. Is that something, or am I just talking?
Well, I think, yeah, in the sense that, like, for example, it could have said more than she hoped for.
Yeah.
But when you bargain, it also means that you are giving something, which means she's sacrificing. You know, so what did Lila sacrifice for Jack? Maybe is some questions we could ask.
What Lila sacrificed, or what Jess sacrificed?
No, Lila. I'm saying if we take it as being about Lila.
I mean, she of course sacrificed her dignity by hanging out with someone potentially poor. She
sacrificed also George Fowler's cufflinks. Now, if you think I don't have pages and pages and pages on Strindberg, and I hope you brought the pages on the other one, because I didn't.
I didn't, but I'm dreading the page.
Maltese Falcon. Falcon, I couldn't.
Yeah. The Strindberg of it all was too much and terrible.
Well, let me just tell you something. Part of the reason I could go into it with Maltese Falcon is because when I think about Maltese Falcon, my main reference for that is something that I'm pretty sure was called the Maltese hamster. The Maltese chipmunk or something like this. It was an episode of Ninja Turtles.
Oh.
Like in the 90s, like the original cartoon, like 80s, 90s. And it was called like the Maltese. You know what? I can't believe I haven't Googled it. Hold on. I swear to God, it's probably called, oh my God. It was called the Maltese hamster. And Robert, when I tell you this aired in 1987, I was 3. And I remember the title of the episode.
That is disturbing to me.
That is really upsetting. Okay. And in the Maltese hamster, Donatello narrates it noir style.
Another rainy night. But who had time to worry about the weather? There was trouble in town. The city was under a reign of mob terror. And my 3 partners and I were the only ones who could stop it. Because we were the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
And they're mobsters. And April tells them that Tony the Butcher Vivaldi at a nightclub called the Meat Rack. He's dragging antiques out of stores. And, Shredder wants the Maltese hamster. Now, what happens? They get back to April's apartment just as the delivery boy hands over the hamster statue. Donatello realizes everyone wants the statue. He takes the statue, gives it over.
This is it. The thing they're all looking for.
My hamster statue?
That's right, sweetheart.
But then it was the fate. And he ends up something like that.
Wait, you're not reading a summary? You're just remembering this? I assumed you were reading a Wikipedia summary. This is off the dome?
No, I was scanning something. Something. Wait, but I'm sorry, is that not insane that I remember that? The Maltese hamster from 1987, Robert. Maybe it came to Canada late. We can only hope it came to Canada late, because if that's in my brain since 3,
it's definitely not in your brain since 3.
Well, now I gotta search one in here. Oh, I'll do that on my own time.
Yeah, I do think we should see the cover. Okay. We've got a very aggressive Jessica Wakefield with an angry fighter's mean mug on, chin jutted out in an emerald green short sleeve button down open neck, staring angrily at Lila Fowler, who has beautiful long brown hair, who's got her arms crossed in front of her over her chest, wearing, it must be said, a wheat-colored blouse. Is that wheat-colored?
To me, it's more like mushroom colored, but sure.
Yeah, I could see that. And she's kind of looking out at us with like very limited affect and with an inscrutable eye.
Agree. I feel like it's just like sort of neutral face.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Jess's face looks truly, truly unbelievable. What we see is just anger, rage, defiance.
And I think importantly, Jessica's gaze is directed at Lila. Lila's gaze is directed at us. I mean, if this cover doesn't reinforce the fact that it's not a showdown, I don't know what does.
Yeah.
Like you said, Jessica seems so sort of activated. Like she's jutting her chin out, I feel like is the most glaring. Like and her hand on her hip and all this, everything about her posture. It's such a contrast. And Lila's much more sort of relaxed face. I got one more little thing on the title.
Hit me.
In poker.
Okay.
A showdown is the requirement at the end of a round. The remaining players must show their cards to determine which has the strongest hand. So when I Googled that, the question I asked was like, is there anything where something about Jess or Lila is being revealed to each other at the end of this? Actually, really, it's Jack the one. Because Jack's the one who's holding his cards, and he's the one who, by the end, some of that gets revealed.
Yeah, I was just thinking that we as a reader get to see more insight into how Jessica manages to seduce.
Like what?
Oh, I don't want to spoil it. I want to read the passage when we get there because it is such an exciting and alluring passage. One word. Matches.
Oh,
come on. I mean, come on.
Jessica needs to have a paywalled masterclass in seduction, because what she did with a match in this book There should be courses. This should be in a federalized curriculum, what she did.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like it. I've never heard anything like it. I was aroused. I was impressed. I was intrigued.
And by the way, when we get to it, I got a whole rant about kids these days, and they'll never know about such things because of the phones, but we'll get to it.
Well, we'll get there. We'll get there when we get there. So our text opens kind of uneventfully, basically with Jessica just being like, I want to meet Lila's mystery man, and just kind of like setting up the plot of this book. Jessica is interested in the fact that Lila has a guy she knows nothing about.
Mm-hmm.
She's talking to Elizabeth. We get the first glimpse of Elizabeth's kind of hypocrisy and annoyance, but it's not the last. She's criticizing Lila, and she's like, knowing Lila Fowler, she probably invented this whole pool party just to lure him over to her house and show him off to everyone. It's like, Elizabeth, you and Jessica do that all the time. There have been so many whole cloth created pool parties and other parties just to show off. Like, oh, all of a sudden Lila does it and it's a problem.
This also bothered me. And in addition to what Liz was saying, the narrator is also reinforcing this crazy ideological like supporting of Liz, because listen to how it's described. When Elizabeth talks shit about Lila, right? She out of nowhere, like no one was bringing this up, like she's just whatever. And then she just says, knowing Lila Fowler, she probably invented this whole thing to lure him over, right? But then what does the narrator say? She laughed good-naturedly.
Yeah.
But then in the next line, when Jessica says, oh, and she's going to want to show off the splendor Fowler crest to him, I swear Lila never gets tired of flaunting her wealth. There was disdain in her voice. Jessica and Liz are doing the same thing, which is talking shit about Lila, and the narrator is telling us that Liz is good-natured and Jessica is disdainful and envious. Yeah, and then it says, and Elizabeth detected a note of envy as well.
Yeah, which I do think is definitely there. I think the envy that Elizabeth detects is true. I just think...
And she has it too.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Of course. Of course.
Don't you say of course. Elizabeth gave her sister a hard stare. Jessica Wakefield, you're not, by any strange chance, thinking of going after Lila's new friend yourself. I'm not? Jessica asked with mock innocence. And why not, if he's so fabulous? We get Elizabeth meddling, of course, from the very beginning, saying, like, you shouldn't do this, Jessica. Honestly, Jess, you haven't even met the guy yet. What about Lila? She's your friend and she met him first. I like that Jessica goes, and I'll meet him next. She has this way of just like getting me over to her side, even when she is completely wrong, which I'm not saying she is in this case, but like, I like it.
She met him first, and I'll meet him next.
We immediately kind of rid ourselves of Neil Fremont, who was a potential love interest, maybe last book, and now is just like, no, he's just a friend.
But he was always described as like until something better comes along.
Liz again just shows her inability to understand anyone's relationship that isn't her steady relationship with Todd. She's like, you're letting him take you to this party? And she's like, well, he's allowed to see other girls and I'm allowed to see other guys. And Liz is like, well, he never does. Like he's not seeing other girls, so it's not fair for you to see other guys. And Jessica like very fairly says, you know, Liz, I can't help it if I drive boys wild.
But also she says that's not my problem, which is true. Like,
yeah.
I agree with you. She's being completely fair. Like, if she and Neil are being transparent with each other and she's being honest with him about the fact that she's not exclusive and she's seeing other guys, then, and if he's fine with that and he's okay with her seeing other people and he's not seeing other people at the moment, like, this is not for Elizabeth to worry about.
Could not agree more.
And then Elizabeth climbs out of the pool and stretches her lithe, tanned body out on a beach towel.
Did you clock that much like the Wakefield's kitchen?
Yes, of course.
Sorry. The idea that the Fowlers have a Spanish-style patio.
I mean, the Wakefields are trying to absolutely keep up with the Fowlers and the Patmans.
And it's not enough.
So we're at the Fowlers for this pool party. We got Todd, Enid, and George and Liz.
George Warren.
Warren's, yeah, right.
Sorry, listeners.
Did you have the same reaction I did? Which was like Liz asks George about his flying lessons, and when he talks about flying, it's very, very similar to when Todd was talking about riding his hog. Can you read it?
Absolutely.
Liz goes, oh, I forgot. Today's a flying day. How's that going, George?
It's fantastic. You can't imagine how it feels to be soaring through the air in the cockpit of your own glider. He looked up at the bright, cloudless sky as if to emphasize his point.
We get some benign mention of the fact that Robin Wilson's in the class at this point.
It was so jarring to be like, oh, Robin's in the program too. And I was like, yeah, this is, from this moment, I was like, this is absolutely a setup for the next book. Like, there is no reason that Robin would ever be in a flight lessons class. We're just setting this up.
Can I ask you though, did you right away say affair, or you just said something's planted?
I didn't have the words yet. I was still kind of struggling to find my footing. So I can't say that I said affair, but I did say something the milk ain't clean.
Then we got an uncomfortable, for me, dog paddle race between Winston and Nicholas, and everyone's laughing their heads off over this. And I just wrote down, can Nicholas please find some friends his own age?
Yes.
Please.
Oh, so I'd love to bring into the conversation and a longtime listener, an art therapist, Liz, who messaged us on Instagram. That's our Instagram account, Sweet Valley Hive. Hit that V, Hive. And just said, if Nicholas is so hot and so smart and so kind, why is he not hanging out with people his own age? Why is this Adonis creature so obsessed with 16-year-olds? And to that, Liz, I say, absolutely. What is going on, Nick? Grotesque.
Well, let's just think there for a second, because he's taking a gap year from college to learn his father's business, and he lives at home, which means like the only people he spends time with is like his family, his dad's clients, and the 16-year-old kids. It's not good.
Not good. Now, were you uncomfortable because of the dog paddle nature of the race, or just because Nick is competing against a child?
None of that. I was just uncomfortable because I'm always sort of on edge when Winston's doing one of his spectacles. And then Nicholas just annoys me. And it's just, so them together being trying to be cute, and then everyone's laughing and they think it's like the funniest thing they've ever seen. I'm like, it's not funny. It's just, like, I just wish Winston could get like some Adderall or something so he could stop like smashing milk cartons on people and like splashing water on people's face and like making a scene every second. All right, elsewhere on the grounds of Fowler Crest, we have Olivia strumming a guitar, and I did want to know what song do you think she's singing?
Well, so this was before, like, obviously Taylor or Oasis. Like,
yeah, it was like 80 years before Taylor.
Well, it's hard for me to think about
it was
a woman.
before Taylor's like grandparents.
That is true. Sorry, this is before Taylor Swift was just a glimmer in her great grandparents' eyes. Is there a chance she's singing like a? It feels like she is either singing Joni Mitchell or Stevie Nicks. Something kind of conspicuously, almost like twee. So in comes Lila with a tall, well-built young man. His powerful-looking arms and handsome face were deeply tanned, and his honey brown hair was shot with sun-lightened streaks. He was dressed conservatively in a pair of khaki walking shorts, a term of art I'm not familiar, a green Lacoste shirt, and topsiders.
All the like East Coast / WASP signifiers in this book make me laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh. I'm sorry, but when he later is talking about playing badminton at Grandmama's or whatever, and then they talk about Martha's Vineyard, it's just constant. I can't.
But it's also accurate. Like, this is definitely
so funny.
I mean, I think it's one of those well-observed, hilarious because it's true moments. Like, absolutely, I have worn this outfit.
Wait, really?
Wait, it's just khaki shorts, a green shirt, and topsiders. Absolutely have I worn this outfit.
No, it isn't. It's a green Lacoste shirt.
Well, I can't afford a Lacoste shirt.
No, but are you wearing are you trying to have a little critter on there?
I would love to have a little critter on there. Absolutely.
Okay, and then I think it's also the shoes. That's very...
Yeah, I had boat shoes.
I'm just trying to... I mean, are you asking for my fashion advice right now? Because
always.
I would say I would love to just get rid of the boat shoes and never wear another boat shoe.
Yeah, I don't wear boat shoes anymore.
Okay, great.
Oh.
They should be gone.
Yeah,
okay, good.
I was just going to point out there are a couple of signifiers that were meant to home in on. One is the fact that he's clearly been out in the sun working a lot, so he's deeply tan, sun-streaked hair. But the other thing is the almost violence with which he is described. The fact that he's well built and he has powerful looking arms. It feels like there's a hint, and maybe this is, of course, because I've read to the end of the book, not to brag. But it feels like there's a hint of something negative to come in the power in his arms. Like there's a violence there.
And his hair is shot with sunlight and streaks. You know, he's almost the reverse Roger, because Roger had a pale, pale tummy. For him, the paleness was a signifier of poor. For Jack, the tannedness, you know, and of course we know the stories in older times being tanned but Roger eventually gets money, but lacks all the social prowess. And we talked about his discomfort versus the ease of a Jessica around the rich, fancy people and knowing how to talk like them and everything. Whereas Jack has all the signifiers and may or may not got the cash.
Well, he can get the cash, don't worry. He may not have it on him, but he's good for it, if you know what I mean.
And you just tell me when you want to talk about Strindberg.
Okay, but I'm never going to want to talk about Strindberg. So we finally get to meet him, and Jessica notes that he is coming in. And this is where Jessica shows herself just to be a seductress to the extreme and just like a brilliant, brilliant tactician. I think the average hot person is just going to go up to Jack and be like, hey, you're hot, I'm hot, let's be hot together. And Jessica is playing whichever one is more complicated, while the rest of us are playing whichever one is less complicated. Because instead of going up to Jack, she says, Neil, I don't know about you, but I'm broiling. I think I'll go take a swim. And without waiting for a response, Jessica was up in a flash, heading for the pool and Jack. When she got within a few feet of him and had made sure he was looking in her direction, she slipped out of her terry cloth beach robe, revealing a minuscule turquoise bikini that showed off her every curve. She mounted the diving board and, without a second's hesitation, executed a graceful backflip into the water. Nice dive, Jack remarked to Lila. Lila replied non-committally. A second later, Jessica surfaced. She looked over at Lila and Jack and waved. Come on in. The water's great. So brilliant.
Yeah, I think it's described like at one point it's like musical chairs in the pool. And it's just constant sort of orchestrating and yeah, brilliant.
I love the way that instead of going up to him and saying like, hi, this is my name, please notice me. She's like, no, I'm going to create such a scene that he has to notice me and then he will. Yeah.
I also like that she thinks to herself, the less he wears, the better he looks when she sees him in his bathing suit.
I love that.
I was LOL at how Jessica's always so bored by Ken Matthews. And like every time Ken Matthews is talking to her, she's never listening and always trying to get away from the conversation. Like even though they're friends. Last book, I think we had him talking to her about his campaign for centennial student, whatever. And she was like trying to get out. And then now this time he's telling her about a new stunt he learned to do on water skis. And she's like, oh, I just remembered something I have to tell my sister.
Yeah, she's like, cool, nice. We kind of skimmed over it, but Lila and Jack get in the water. And basically, Jack stays stationary and Lila and Jessica keep circling him to put one of them closer than the other. And it's referred to as Pardo so explicitly said, a waterbound game of musical chairs. Jessica is just so talented at managing people and especially managing boys. I love it so, so, so dearly. Her kind of aquatic finesse is serving as an immediate counterpoint to Nicholas and Winston like dog paddling through the pool and like just being like sloppy little idiots. And she is like so finessed and so classy. And I love that.
Yeah, but what does it show? It shows that like all men have to do to like get positive attention is act like idiots, but women have to actually have talent or like perform.
She's twice as smart and she's pulling in a smaller audience.
Nicholas meets Jack and he looks familiar and he's like, do I know you from somewhere? And Jack's like, oh, I don't think so. And then Nicholas does all the signifiers. Sailing camp? I used to go to Tilalaka sailing camp in New Hampshire when I was a kid. Jack shook his head. Well, what about Martha's Vineyard? My family used to have a summer house there. Nope. You've never spent any time on the East Coast? And then he's like being elusive or evasive. He says, I've been there, but I've been there, but I really can't remember ever seeing you before. We have Jessica and Lila sort of maneuvering around, showing around Jack the house.
Lila's showing Jack the new gym, which is such a stupid thing anyways. But Jessica's like, oh, I'd love to see the gym too.
You know what I wrote down? We've talked about how Jessica would be fantastic on Survivor. She'd be fantastic on Housewives. She'd be fantastic on any manner of reality show. But she would also be really great on The Bachelor because she knows how to get that one-on-one time, and she knows how to finagle. And we saw it with Bill and Dee Dee with the water, and Dee Dee, can I use your surfboard? Oh, please, don't go on my account. And it's just, she's just,
yeah.
I mean, she's just a mistress, as we always say.
Yeah. Name a reality show she wouldn't excel on. I'll wait. The Masked Dancer, she would crush. The Masked Singer, we haven't heard her singing voice, but probably pretty good.
Period.
I do worry about like a Top Chef situation. She has not shown any culinary prowess whatsoever.
Wait a minute. Did we get to is this book the one where she makes dinner? Oh,
no.
Okay. In the next book, okay, this is not a spoiler, but
Feels like it might be.
No, it fully isn't. It is. You know what? I can't never be allowed to spoil. I need to be able to have some discretion. In the next book, Jessica makes dinner for the Wakefield. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
And some things may or may not go right or wrong, is all I'm going to say. Okay, so, it is, as you mentioned, the servants' day off. So unfortunately, when the phone rings, Lila has to leave Jack with Jessica to get the phone.
Jack and Jessica kind of catch up. She's making her voice sweeter than maple syrup.
She's trying to press him for details. He's not giving much. And of course, just asks her many, many questions. And she kind of obliges.
And I will say in Jessica's defense, not that she needs a defense, but Jack is the one who really, like, he's the one who starts. He says, like, the prettiest twins I've ever seen. And then she says, I'd love to get to know you better. Why don't you give me a call sometime and we can have dinner together or something? She let her voice linger seductively on the or something. Sounds great, Jack agreed. Jessica allowed herself a triumphant smile. I'm sure we'll have a great time. Here, let me give you my phone number. She looked around for a pen or pencil, but there was nothing on the little steel and glass table in the foyer except a small book of matches. Quickly, she picked up the matches, struck one, and then blew it out. She used the charred tip to write her number on the inside of the matchbook cover. There you go. She pressed the matchbook into Jack's hand and let their fingers touch for a moment.
That is so freaking cool. I mean, what it really is cool.
So cool.
Just to be super clear about what she has done here. To give this person her phone number, she lights a match, blows it out, and uses the chart tip to write her number on the inside of the matchbook. Okay? And children have to know, okay, that before cell phones, giving a phone number to a person or get like the ways in which that happened and the mediums and the artifacts generated and the various materials, you had to be resourceful. You had to be, I mean, a lipstick on a napkin, sure. We all know that old chestnut. But, you know, then we got matchsticks on matchbooks. We got, you know, sometimes you just sort of throw glass against a wall, take the shard and do it in blood on, you know, or what.
That's not a thing. What? Listeners, that's not a thing and it's not an okay idea.
And blood and bloodline is one of the major themes of this book that we must discuss.
Sure. This is unlocking a core memory of me where I was out with a friend. Our server was a girl, but there was a cute gay waiter around. And as my friend and I were leaving, and I remember this girl running up to me and pressing into my hand a folded little strip of paper and saying, my friend wanted you to have this, and then just running away. And I opened it up and it was his number.
I love that. Was he cute?
I think he was cute. I feel like maybe I was like out of town or something. And so I was with a friend where I didn't live, and so it wouldn't have even made sense to call.
That's lovely. Then we're at the end of chapter 1. We get Jack, quote unquote, spilling the beans, and he takes a deep breath and tells Jessica that he's a construction worker. So it's interesting because we get this setup of spilling the beans, but it's it's supposed to be seen as like the fake spilling the beans, right? Like in Lila's mind, he's spilling the beans to Jessica about being a construction worker, but Lila thinks he's not really a construction worker. So, all right. Chapter 2, we get basically Lila and Jessica are both agreeing that his wardrobe, his bearing, his entire manner seems princely, and he must be something beyond a mere construction worker. And they're speculating on what might his real exciting background be. Basically, then Lila just asks him. She's like, not that there's anything wrong with construction work, but like, she goes, you really don't seem like the type. He says, what type do you think I am? And she's like, you seem more important, like you're destined for big things. And he's like, and you don't think building buildings and fixing water mains is big things? And he's like, well, I'm just teasing you. I am a full-time construction worker, but I do have a secret. My life hasn't been like the rest of the guys I'm with. And then she gets excited. She has a glimmer of hope. And it's like, what's your secret? And then I think we need to really explain here what he tells her about his background, okay? He goes, I left home almost a year ago. My father is a very important and powerful man and is used to running everyone's life, including mine. He sent me to the right summer camp, the right prep school, and was planning on sending me off to Princeton. Just like him and my grandfather, he had my whole life mapped out, and I was supposed to be some kind of puppet, letting him pull the strings. And then she's like, oh, that's terrible. Who's your dad? And he's like, I can't tell you. And he's like, I want to be my own person and make it on my own without any help from my family or like special privileges. And like, I want to make it from the bottom up. So basically what he's saying is that he has moved away from like his home, which he's not saying where it is, and moved away from his family and is apparently like semi-estranged from them or alienated from them to some degree, because he wants to succeed without their help. So the presumption being that like this would be impossible for him to do if he were to either like live wherever he came from because his family's so famous that like everyone knows who he is, or if he were to, for example, tell Lila his last name. So he just doesn't tell anyone. Like we don't get an alias. We don't get a last name that he goes by that he says, but I have a different last name. Like, so what are we meant to believe on the level of literally what's going on? He's literally just in Sweet Valley, like going as Jack Doe. I mean, It's so crazy.
I think we're supposed to believe that his last name is like Rockefeller or similar. At one point, I think they even say, like, is he a Vanderbilt? Is he a Rockefeller? Who is he? I think we're supposed to believe he is such a big deal.
One thing that I think is really important about this paragraph is that what he describes his family and his father as very important and powerful. And he describes having a sort of family legacy of having been sent to Princeton and all the right schools. This all implies very, very hard money, but he doesn't say the word, but he doesn't actually say the word wealthy. What I think is actually really interesting about this book is that the nature of his and his family's financial situation is right until the end left really, really muddy. Which is to say, and I don't know if we should go there, but when we ultimately sort of find out, it's still really confusing at the end.
Yes.
What the sort of reality of his story was and how different that was from this story that he's now telling in terms of his family's power and influence or whatever. So Lila buys it. Oh, and so what he tells her is that he tells her that it's just his dad and his sister Valerie, because his mom died a few years ago. You know, and then he drops some more signifiers. He's talking about Valerie. We loved exploring the woods in the back of Grandpapa's chalet in Switzerland, or hiding from Veronique, our governess, the old Parisian woman. Of course, father made sure we were brought up fluent in French, and he had us studying Latin as well. By the time I was 10, Valerie was 8. Lila relaxed in her chair. Literally, just him saying these words makes her relax in her chair. Just hearing the word Switzerland or our governess, Veronique, like grandpapa, chateau, literally just the words makes her physically relax. Oh no, she wailed. Daddy's back. He must have managed to find a flight home tonight after all. And now we get into some muddy waters where this whole like, when is Lila relieved or not, or when does she feel like she knows what she needs to know about Jack, or when does he meet the bar or not? So it's like, first she saw him, he's a construction worker, but she senses he's something more. Then he tells her, yes, I am something more, but I'm alienated from my family and currently sort of in this weird thing. And then she's like, oh, well, then I can't introduce him to Daddy, because even if he's like has the right signifiers in terms of can talk about high culture, but he is alienated from his family, Daddy's not going to like that. So she's like, okay, well, that's still not good enough. And this is where we're going to have to start talking about Strindberg.
I am doing everything I can to delay the Strindberg talk.
Strindberg conversation. I know. We're going to have it. All right.
We're going to have it, so we might as well have it. Very quickly, can you just say why we're even bringing up Miss Julie and Strindberg in the first place?
Later in the book, we find out Jessica is reading Miss Julie.
For class. Her English teacher is assigning the little-known Strindberg play Miss Julie. And I guess it's not little known exactly, but like, as someone who was a high school English teacher, the idea that the class is reading Miss Julie by Strindberg is beyond preposterous.
I mean, I'll tell you something.
Ludicrous, laughable, unrealistic, ridiculous.
I read it in college, and I hadn't heard of it until I read it. I did find my paper. From that class.
Ooh! Okay, wait. When you said you had pages on Strindberg, I didn't mean you literally had written a college paper, a manuscript. Now, this is when you were studying abroad? Is that what I'm to understand?
That's correct.
Because I thought, what Brandeis class would cover Strindberg? Brandeis is so provincial. You would need to be in a center of learning like Oxford to really get into Strindberg.
Yeah. So Strindberg's Miss Julie was written in 1888.
Ever heard of it?
And when I was studying it, my tutor assigned it to me and to read that with Patrick Marber's After Miss Julie, which is a kind of reboot. Sort of.
As historians and critics refer to it, a reboot.
From 1995. So I wrote a paper about both of the plays. But let me tell you, one of the main things about Miss Julie, her dad's like a count, I think. So it's about this count estate. And we got the rich daughter, who's Miss Julie. She ends up having the hots for one of their like servant guys. And she starts like sleeping with the like servant guy, but he also is like kind of mean to her. So listen. And after Miss Julie, Julie tells basically the other version of the guy, he's still a servant. And he's like, and you're a servant slut. And then he tells her that her earliest ancestor was a stinking, stupid farmer. And he says the blood of a whore runs through you for centuries. Whereas Julie's behavior decreases her status, Jean, though he's technically a servant, is able to hover somewhere above his born status due to his knowledge of theater and his sophisticated language. After he tells Julie the story of how he fell in love with her, she comments, "You're a charming storyteller. Did you ever go to school?" And he says, "A bit, but I've read lots of novels and been to the theater often. And then I've listened to people like you talk. That's where I learn most." She basically is seen as like someone who's fallen from her status. And then, listen, the entire play has anticipated Julie's father's arrival. His presence haunts the play since the beginning, but we never get to meet him. In Miss Julie, Julie, tormented, says, "There's the Count. I've never met anyone I had such respect for. When I see his gloves lying on a chair, I feel small." That's like, doesn't that kind of sound like Lila with the cufflinks?
Yeah.
That's it, basically.
Oh, sorry. So for our listeners who maybe had a little bit more trouble following that because they don't understand the plot of Miss Julie or how it fits into this text, could you give us like a one sentence kind of, it's about the father and kind of class and status anxiety? Is that what it is?
Well, yeah, basically it's like, one of the things I noticed, last book, we had two examples of Lila being at her dad's office. In the first case, she was at her dad's office because her dad's secretary had told her that her dad asked her to come in. But then we never actually find out what he called her there for. And we never actually see her interaction with him. Then at the end of last book, she goes to her dad's office to see Jack, sees Jack, has another interaction with him. And then the secretary sees her and she's like, "Oh, I guess I'm here to meet Dad." One of the last scenes in the last book was like, she goes up thinking to herself, like, what excuse am I going to give Dad of why I'm here or something?
Yes, exactly.
And we never see that conversation. And so that was two times that there was a bit of a ghostly presence of George. And this book, too, I think is haunted by the spectral presence of George Fowler, because there's so much of her ruminating on what daddy's going to think and what daddy's going to think. And, oh, is daddy coming home? And daddy's plane got in early. And, oh, is daddy on the phone? And maybe he's telling me this. And is he going to be here yet? Oh, no, daddy's coming home. What if he sees him and he's not going to approve and all this stuff? And I don't think he ever comes home, does he? Do we actually see him in this book? I don't think so.
No, I don't think we see him at all.
And so this can, I think, give us a little bit of a way into the Strindberg conversation. Part of Lila's like full anxiety is around their family's new money. And we get a reiteration in this book of the age-old battle between the Patmans and the Fowlers. And the Patmans are the old, and the Fowlers are the new. And the Patmans want every rock, and the Fowlers like computers. Okay? And this one wants that, and this one wants change. You know, we get a throwaway line in this book of Lila saying she's annoyed at Bruce, or she's not going to invite him to a party, or she didn't invite him to a party because you should have heard what his dad said about my dad at the town meeting. And Lila has it, right? She has all the class and the status stuff, but she doesn't have that necessarily like generational lineage. She doesn't have the status in terms of the bloodline. I don't know. I don't necessarily hear her talking about grandpapa all the time.
No.
So, like,
well, her grandpapa wasn't wealthy, so why would you ever speak about him?
We might see it as she's the rich one, he's the poor one, she's on top, he's on bottom. But like what I think is happening in both Showdown and Miss Julie and after Miss Julie is that what we're seeing is that both the Miss Julie, the rich one, and Gene, the servant guy, are both in these more liminal states where is sort of outside of his status in some ways. Okay. And so is she in the reverse way. So she's kind of falling. And also how the father, everything depends on the father. Just this idea of like Lila's anxiety of him coming home. Like I felt it.
It's interesting. I tried to read the plot of Miss Julie and was like, I can't. Do we want to keep moving?
Okay, basically Jack calls and asks Jessica out. Liz is skeptical of Jack and says to Jess, like, if he's so great, why is he dating both of you? And Jess is like, no, he's going to break up with her.
You kind of alluded to the fact that bad stuff happened as a result of the party. Lila says, my dad is really mad at me because this expensive vase got broken at the party, and then the drain to the pool got all clogged up, and the worst thing is that all dad's gold cufflinks and tie clips have disappeared.
Then chapter 3, we get Colin's hand on a shoulder with Liz. Liz being the interim editor of the newspaper and having an absolute losing her applesauce. Colin's helping her organize all her pieces of paper.
We get the phantom photo. The first phantom photo that we're interested in is this kind of candid black and white photo of Tad Johnson, a 240-pound linebacker for the Sweet Valley High football team, kissing a tiny teddy bear. In the background, Elizabeth could just make out Jessica and the other cheerleaders warming up before a game. And no one knows who took this uproarious picture, but it is just a really interesting commentary on kind of gender role expectations. So thank you, Phantom Photo or whoever you may be, for all your good work.
Then we get Jessica reading Miss Julie, wondering why Jack would want to date Lila, if not for money, since he apparently doesn't need the money. Then Jack calls and asks her out.
I just can't get over the horse doesn't know he's in the race.
We get some closet play with Liz and Jess. Liz is skeptical of Jack. Why is he dating two girls at once? Jessica says, no, he's going to tell Lila.
Liz is just so hypocritical. A couple of books ago, she was a good person who managed to talk herself into it being okay for her to go on a date with Nick, even though she was with Todd. But Jack, like, casually dating two people at once seems to be really, really beyond the pale.
And furthermore, the justification that Jessica's giving for specifically why he's doing it is almost identical to the sort of hospitality reasons that Liz was telling herself of Nick. So Jessica says, that's why he's taking Lila out. I mean, he was practically a perfect stranger, and she invited him to her party and then introduced him to everyone. He owes it to her to go out again. And Nicholas said to Elizabeth, you owe me. And she's like, well, I want to be compassionate. He's new in town, blah, blah, blah. So same bullshit.
Same bullshit.
Jack shows up at the Wakefields with all the right signifiers, the camel-colored slacks, the button-down shirt and light blue Egyptian cotton brown loafers and a matching belt.
I mean, it sounds like a great outfit.
And a single red rose. Very Bachelor-like, actually, now that I think of it.
Oh, yeah.
This? Oh, my God. So The Bachelor is just a ripoff of this whole book.
Yes, without question. One man dating several women with roses.
a single long-stemmed rose.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, but I'm not sorry.
And then he just dazzles the Wakefields by talking about beautiful Japanese arrangements at the florist and stuff.
And I did think this was interesting, the way that we're like, one of the kind of questions of the book is, who will he choose? Is he going to go with Lila? Is he going to go with Jessica? And one of the main differences, it seems, betwixt the two of them is that he actually does get to meet Jessica's family. And so I thought this was just kind of an interesting counterpoint, the way that Lila is keeping Jack distance from her family, whereas Jessica like says, come on in.
Yeah, it's funny. The only hint at a possible friction point that doesn't ever happen is when she introduces them, Mom, Dad, this is Jack, and she thinks, and Ned extends his hand, and if he'd noticed that Jessica had introduced Jack by only his first name, he had said nothing about it. So it's like the only thing that potentially the Wakefields would want is like, well, do you even have a last name? But like that didn't seem to cause a problem. And then like he has a rusty old Rambler, and he says, unfortunately, since I left home, my days of fancy cars is over. And Jessica climbs into the car as if it's a Rolls Royce, and she used to tell Elizabeth that she only likes the best cars and she wouldn't be caught dead in something like Todd's Datsun. But suddenly this Rambler seems like the classiest car in all of California. We get all these really, really nuanced moments that show us that the way these social class stuff works is so multifaceted and negotiated and like contingent, and like it's like if something low status happens that's in the context of high status, then it's okay or something. Or like when Nicholas around in a Jeep, or like exactly. So yeah. And she, she's like, well, it's good enough for me. And then basically as they're driving around, she sort of realizes that he very much sort of values independence and work, and that he doesn't want to tell her stuff about himself.
And that he's just a walking red flag. But she's like, oh, cool.
Like, he literally won't tell her anything. She's like, so you grew up on the West Coast? He's like, she's like, oh, so the East Coast? He's like, not exactly. It's like, what? Like, come on.
That I don't totally, it's the same. I think you were maybe making this point earlier about how he like doesn't even come up with a fake name. Like it is a little confusing, because is it that he doesn't want to lie? He's just like stonewalling everyone, and everyone is just kind of like accepting that as okay. It's very confusing.
Well, it's almost like, remember how we talked about how Jessica uses people's perceptions of her? Like, this one's hard to keep in your head, because it's not like he's a rich guy pretending to be poor. Mm-hmm. He's not a poor guy pretending to be rich. Those are things we understand. He's like a rich guy who probably doesn't, or like his family used to be rich and then lost their money or something. Because like, why the fuck wouldn't he have an inheritance at this point? Or why would his uncle have had to scrape together money for him to go to that school? And like, none of that makes sense. Like, he would have had money. So something happened that they lost their money, because I do think they had money, because otherwise why are them all going to Princeton? Anyway.
If they did all go to Princeton, we don't actually know.
Sorry, but I mean, they had that lifestyle to begin with.
Right.
Like, they sent him to that fancy prep school. So some of this stuff, and they had a boating accident, which means maybe they're boating people. Like, I don't know. But like, he's saying, I'm a simple construction worker, knowing that they're going to go to the extreme, when the truth is somewhere in the middle. And so he's encouraging that, right? And so when he say things like, oh, the bell tolls for me, to ruin an old quote, or, oh, back with grandmama, he's playing on the fact that they want to think that, to enable what is actually, but the reality is just actually quite muddy and something in between, which is like, he's not just poor, he's not just rich, he's some more complicated history, I think. And then Liz goes to Penny's house, talk about newspaper stuff, and guess what? Her house has 2 stories.
Which is nice.
We learned that there have been more phantom photos received. We meet Tina, who is the sister of Penny. And she says, yes, these phantom photos are great.
Well, Penny charges Liz with figuring out who the phantom photographer is. You're the paper's best journalist, Liz, and every journalist is something of a detective. See if you can find out who's taking these pictures. I'd like to offer the photographer a position as a staff photographer. So Monday morning at school, Lila comes in, she's floating, her life is amazing, and she mentions that it was the absolute best weekend of my entire life. She, is important to note, is happy and floating. Jessica's fists are clenched, she's enraged.
Just to clarify, Jack had committed to Jessica that he was going to he was going to keep his dates with Lila for that weekend to be polite or whatever, but that he was going to end it with her. So Jessica was expecting Lila to come in having been dumped.
And instead, she saw Jack on Friday and Saturday and Sunday. And she's going to see him again next Friday because he can't go out on weekdays.
We get a bunch of like internal monologue from Jess of like who to be mad at. And first she's mad at Lila, and then she's like, okay, if I'm being real with myself, the trouble lay with Jack. How could he do this to her? So she like finally basically recognizes that Jack is at fault here. But then she also sort of sees that like she still wants him. So it's like she's angry at him and she wants to sort of be able to, I don't know, assert that or act on that or whatever, get rid of him maybe. But like she realizes that she actually wants to spend time with him. And sadly, he's smart and fun and handsome. But sadly for me, part of what she also likes about him is that he's a good listener. But of course, he's just listening to her because, you know, he A, doesn't want to say things about himself, and B, probably wants to hear information so he can, you know, break into her house or her wallet or whatever. So
I do think this is a marked and pretty unbelievable moment of maturity from Jessica. We've seen so many times in earlier books where she like can't figure out who to place her rage in. And she's figured out now that she's actually angry with Jack. And this was like one of the first times she's actually angry with the boy who is being shitty. She doesn't hold on to that for long, but she does have it for a moment.
Yeah, so the win is that she identifies the feeling. She
Right.
acknowledges the feeling. She absolutely does not honor it or act on it. Like she pushes it down pretty much ASAP. But yeah. Because then when she talks to Liz, she's like, yeah, I know he's wrong or whatever, but like I'm in love with him. And Liz is like, just dump him. And Jessica's like, I can't. And then we get another door moment. So Jess and Liz are both getting ready for dates. Jack and Todd are at the door. When Jack shows up, Liz notices that his eyes are red and puffy.
He says he came from the pool at the community center. The chlorine sometimes irritates my eyes. I don't think anybody believes this. Well, no, I think within the world of the text, they believe him. I was like, this boy is stoned.
They leave for their dates. On Liz and Todd on their date sort of speculate, you know, something in milk maybe ain't clean. Then
well, especially because Liz goes out of her way to include French as she's saying goodbye to Jessica and Jack. And Jack has no reaction, even though he is supposed to be fluent in French.
Then at the movie theater, Jessica's trying to be like an independent woman who buys the snacks and drinks at the movie theater. And she says, let me go get the snacks. And then she realizes that her wallet is gone from her purse.
Uh-oh. Jack is like, oh, don't worry, you'll find it.
It's giving lavalier.
It is giving lavalier.
She asks him about Lila. He says they're just friends. His face briefly darkens. And then he basically says, okay, fine. I promise I'm going to clear it up with Lila and I'm done with her and that's it. And Jessica's like, fine.
And he is smart enough to understand that she will accept that he was being like politic or socially appropriate. So he actually gives the same explanation that Jessica says he would give. Like, she invited me to that party when she hardly knew me. I was just reciprocating. And then they ran into each other on Sunday. It wasn't a date. And he says, just trust me. You're the one that I want. And on Friday, I'll finally break up.
Back at the Oracle office,
Liz is finally finished. And she's dreaming about an ice cream sundae at Casey's place. Just clocking Casey's place because I don't think I've heard it before. Sunday shop?
Mm-hmm. Ice cream, yeah.
Love.
We get the reveal of the phantom photographer. Okay, it's Tina. It's Tina.
Of course it's Tina because she is the only new character.
She tells Liz, the reason I've been submitting these photos in secret, it's because actually Penny just thinks I'm her annoying, talentless little sister. She has no respect for me. She's not going to want to work with me. And if she knew it was me, she wouldn't be interested. And Liz is like, I really don't think so. I think she's going to think it's so great. And why don't you let me tell her? And Tina's like, okay.
And then she looks through Tina's photos. And what does she see?
She sees
Tina had obviously gone out to the airfield to take photos of the students in the flying class. In the photo Elizabeth now held in her hand, Tina had caught Robin Wilson and George Warren against a backdrop of small planes, and they were locked in a heated embrace.
She goes home. She's watching Maltese Falcon, but she's grappling with, should I tell Enid? Jess comes home and tells her, Jack promised me he's going to dump Lila. That being said, then we get to chapter 9. It turns out not quite.
Lila starts to think of him as her fiance. In their conversation, Jack keeps saying, I love you, I love you.
And like, I want to be with you forever and like probably get married.
Someday I want you to be my wife.
And listen to how she imagines their wedding announcement in the Sweet Valley News. Miss Lila Fowler, daughter of computer chip millionaire, is engaged.
So Elizabeth is still, and I mean, listeners, you will not be surprised, racked with guilt and indecision. Do I tell Enid? Do I not tell Enid about the fact that George is cheating?
Okay, so basically Liz being like, well, sometimes appearances can be deceiving and I better find out for sure, decides to drive out to the airfield, and she sees George and Robin, and they are also in an embrace. And then they see her and quickly separate. And then they basically tell her, yeah, it's true. And we feel really, 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 really bad about it. And like, at first we were just friends. Like we thought it was just friendship. But then like, ultimately we couldn't deny our feelings for each other. And like, we're actually really in love. We feel so bad. Like I would never want to hurt Enid. And Robin's like, I would never want to hurt Alan Waters, who I'm also dating. And like, we're going to break up with them as soon as possible. I promise.
The kind of mental gymnastics, I mean, I know listeners, we do this every single book, so I'm sorry, but like Liz's mental gymnastics that get her to the point where she's like, well, what should happen is I should go investigate myself rather than just bringing this to Enid and letting Enid make her own decisions. It's just like such classic Liz nonsense.
Oh, sorry, to clarify, Robin says that she already broke up with Alan. She says, I talked to Alan this morning, but then the plan, they tell Liz, is that George had promised Enid, and Enid apparently had been very much looking forward to taking a ride in his plane. And so he says, I won't deny her that wonderful pleasure. So I'm still going to take her on that ride. And then I'm going to break up with her right after that, I promise. And cut.
Could you imagine
being like, ugh.
Your long-term boyfriend just got his flying license and he takes you for one last flight before he dumps you? That doesn't seem nice to me. I'd rather dump me before the flight. I mean, not that there's a chance in hell I would ever get on that plane in the first place because it seems terrifying and a death trap. But
yeah, it's very strange. All right, chapter 10.
Lila is a little sick and she curses. She says, damn. So curse count for this book is at 1 as well.
Her arms and legs felt weak and rubbery. You know, in Miss Julie and after Miss Julie, we get a lot of sort of paralysis and being in a haze and dreaming and awake and being tired and these sort of in-between states. She's like, well, she's like, I'm sick, but nothing's going to stop me from going out with Jack. But then Eva, their tiny snowy-haired housekeeper, says, Lila, dear, you better get back in bed this instant.
If he's a nice young man, he'll wait. And then Lila calls him her fiance.
And then, so basically Lila then calls off her date with Jack. Jack immediately calls Jess and is like, guess what? I broke the news to Lila, also known as a lie.
Right.
We get a great scene with Jess and Liz. And she says, yeah, he broke the news to her, so everything's like kosher now. They have some back and forth. And then they're talking about eyes and ears. And Jessica says, you know, Liz, you amaze me sometimes. I mean, you never gossip. You don't pay attention to nasty rumors, but in your own quiet way, you know absolutely everything. How do you manage it? A hint of admiration tinged Jessica's words. And Elizabeth's like, that's journalist job. But I'm like, even Jessica buys into this. It's so sad. I know. So Jessica's getting ready to meet Jack, and she's anticipating, finally, I'm going to find out the sort of details behind his story. And he is taking her to none other than Guido's.
I'm so jealous. Ugh. Jessica helped herself to the last piece of Guido's deluxe pie, smothered in tomato sauce and mozzarella cheese and heaped with 6 different toppings. Marry me.
Why didn't they tell us?
Marry me.
Why didn't they tell us the toppings? And then they have her biting a slice and chewing it slowly as if noting every aspect of its rich flavor and texture.
Marry me.
Can we say the toppings?
So there's 6 toppings, and it's the supreme.
It's probably what?
Or the deluxe.
It's probably like, it's probably not what I would want. Go ahead.
No, it's not what you want. It's like, it's pep, it's sausage, it's peppers, it's onions. Is it olives?
Mushrooms?
And mushrooms. That's great.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. And probably it's green peppers.
Yeah. Oh, definitely green peppers.
If it was me, I would take off the green peppers, I would take off the onions, I would take off the mushrooms, and I would take off the sausages, and it would just be like tomatoes, and I would take off the. Oh, I don't know what I would do. All right. Jack's talking about how much he used to love the Caribbean, and him and Valerie used to go snorkeling in the coral reef. And I'm going to show you my pretty pictures. And his eyes darken briefly because Nicholas and Nicholas's friend David have come into the pizza shop, and his eyes darkens briefly when he sees them. And Nicholas has a bad feeling about him. And Nicholas's friend David's like, I recognize him, but I don't know from where. But then he figures out from where. And it's that he robbed a girl at knife point.
He did rob a girl from knife point.
So basically, David, Nicholas's friend, is like, yeah, I went to prep school or something with him on the East Coast, and there was this guy, and I'm pretty sure it's him, that he robbed a girl at knife point that he had been dating. Then Nicholas is like, well, we better get out of here and actually maybe let Jessica know this. So they run out to go tell the Wakefields. And
we get, as they run out, we get this kind of backstory. They say that he's kind of a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He's on drugs. It seems Jack's entire family was killed in a boating accident a few years before he came to school. There was a sister, a younger sister, I think, whom he was particularly close to. Anyway, rumor has it that from the day they died, Jack started escaping into his own little fantasy world where his sister was still alive and where Jack could be anything he wanted to be. The whole situation got worse when his uncle, whom he'd been living with since the accident, scraped up enough money to send him away to school. Anyway, you know how many wealthy kids there were up at school. It seems that in Jack's fantasy world, he saw himself as even richer and more important than they were. He started telling people stories about himself. Pretty soon, I'm not even sure he knew what was real and what wasn't. Oh, his double life grew pretty hard to handle, so he started getting into drugs, which only made his problems harder to control. Apparently, he started stealing to keep himself supplied with drugs and his possessions to fit the new social position he dreamed up. For instance, the amazing thing is that drugs and all, he got away with it for so long. One thing's for sure, the guy's a first-rate actor. From what the girl up at school told her friends, he never let his disguise down for a moment until the day she started asking too many personal questions, and he felt as though he were being trapped in his own lies. Then the Mr. Hyde in him took over, and he turned into a very dangerous character. And this is the thing where, like, the reveal was so much more confusing, because it's like, okay, well, so now we know some things concretely he's lied about, which is he says his sister and father are alive, but actually his sister and both parents are dead. But like, again, the money thing is so ambiguous because we know that it seems like he had fancy life to begin with, or at least fancy enough that he was going to fancy school. But then like after his parents died, it says his uncle scraped enough money to send him to the next fancy school. But then it says he had to steal both to support his like lifestyle that he's trying to project and his drug habit. But so it's really actually confusing of like, so did he come from fucking money or not? It seems like he did. So what is delusion and what is real? They really don't clarify in terms of like actual wealth. Well, and even in terms of, it seems Jack's entire family was killed in a boating accident a few years before he came to school, but we have no corroboration of that either. So it's, I mean, yeah, what is even it seems? Yeah. And the other thing is because he is a pathological liar and he's inventing all these stories, like there's no one to know if any of the stories is true. And then there's the really interesting muddiness of how much of this is intentional, oh, he's a wonderful actor, or how much of it is mental illness or delusion is also unclear. So Elizabeth runs into Nicholas and David. Do we even get a description of David? Is he hot? I don't think we get much. That's disappointing. Let's imagine he's hot. Mm-hmm. They go to the Wakefields. In the meantime, we get a very quick wrap up of the storyline with the Ayalas. Penny and Tina are happy, and that's that. And then we get Nicholas tells Liz the whole story and says we go to find her. I mean, they're all thinking like, oh, Jessica's going to really poke him with questions, and that's what happened. And the other girl got a knife point, so then she's definitely in trouble. So we cut to Jessica at Jack's house. And like, I don't know if you had this experience, but in my mind, I was just like, please don't ask him any questions. Please don't ask him any questions. Please don't ask him any questions. Like, I just was really nervous what was going to happen. We get to his house and it's like shabby and shitty. It's one room. And it's a threadbare rug over a dull linoleum floor, a battered chest of drawers, a tiny tabla with 2 metal framed chairs and an ancient fold-out couch. Jessica's visibly tense. And then we get this thing where Jack says, well, I paid for it myself. Like, I'm not relying on my dad. That's why it looks this way. And then he cuts to, you can get awfully tired of posh when you've been surrounded by it your whole life, which feels like a very different explanation.
Right. Yeah.
It feels like his story is kind of shifting as he's trying to figure out what would be most appealing to Jessica.
Mm-hmm. It is kind of interesting that it says she was disappointed, and then it says she'd expected to see at least some small indication, some memento of his past life. And that, I think, is interesting because it doesn't say she's disappointed because of how shabby it is. It's disappointed because there's nothing personal, and she's trying to understand who he is. So she wants to just know he's a real person. And it's creepy when there's nothing. It's like, it makes you think they're like a spy or something, or
a serial killer.
Yeah.
So Jack is freaking out. He screams at her when she asks for a more recent photo of Valerie. She's like, maybe I should go. And he's like, no, I really want you to see those scuba diving pictures. And the old Jack was back again. Gone was the guy who was screaming and acting a fool.
Then she goes to the bathroom to try to get some information. And she starts looking around, thinking she's going to find something with his name on it, a prescription bottle, or some kind of something that says he's a person. And guess what she finds? An unmarked rectangular box that has drugs, all kinds of drugs.
All kinds of drugs? Were they prescription kind she was hoping to find?
No, they were pills of all different colors and sizes, a jar of white powder, and a plastic bag full of marijuana pipes, rolling papers, and various other accessories.
She's like, well, now I know it wasn't the chlorine made his eyes bad. And then she comes out ready to confront him and put the bag of drugs. What's the meaning of this? And she sees him with his hand elbow deep in her purse.
So this was a confusing moment to me. I understand that Jessica is shocked, but she is such a smart cookie that the idea that she would immediately just rush out and confront him about the drugs is really confusing to me.
She wouldn't. I agree with you. I just don't think... I think it's just, we need a way to trigger him, and that's going to be the thing. But you're right, she wouldn't have done that,
And I think, so he is looking through her purse. He pretends it's from through her bag. He pretends it's to find a match, but obviously it's to try and rob her again. I think she could get upset enough about that to set him off. I don't think we need this her rushing out with the drugs.
I don't know what to tell you. I mean...
Yeah. Regardless, Jess figures out, you can't explain the drugs. What about the money that disappeared the night we went to the movies? And Lila's father's cufflinks, what about those? And suddenly Jack becomes menacing and we get Mr. Hyde out. Don't say another word. She goes, why? Don't you like hearing the truth about yourself, you phony? And then he jumps on her. He pins her to the ground and closes her hands around her throat.
Very upsetting.
Very upsetting.
When I read this was a moment where I felt like, why did it even need to get to this was a book where I didn't see the violence coming. Like, I thought this was going to be a story of a guy who's faking his identity, and Lila and Jess are fighting over him. And in the end, they're going to find out he's fake. And then they're going to do the usual thing we get at the end, which is a public humiliation ritual at a school party where they're going to make everyone laugh at him and he'll slink away, never to be heard from again, kind of thing. When you read a book about two best friends fighting over a boy, and then it's like the boy's lying to both of them, the fact that there isn't at the end the two of them team up against him, why didn't it go that way? It's just so weird that Lila wasn't part of the way. She's so barely involved. It's like she just finds out through a phone call as an FYI, and then she's just still at home. Is so strange. And then the fact that it then goes to this weird violent turn that they have to save her, it just felt really odd to me. And I don't know what to think of it.
I think you do know what to think of it.
But did you also think
yes, I thought it was very, very, it was shocking.
They're going to figure it out and they're going to turn it on him, right? How
John Tucker must die. Happened?
I don't know this.
Oh, John Tucker must. It's a similar 4-timing guy. And
the other woman. The other woman.
What's that?
It's a movie. Kate Upton and some other people, and it's he's 3-timing them or something, and then they turn on him. I don't know, something like this.
Never heard of it.
But yeah, it was just really random that suddenly he's choking her. So then Liz basically calls Lila and is like, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but actually Jess has been seeing Jack, and actually he's sort of a psycho, so what's his address? And Lila's like, okay. And then she gives her the address. She shows up with Nicholas and David.
How does she have his address? Do you have any thoughts on that?
It was just a very, very easy way to get there, I think. I also wondered about, like, why would he have even told her? I guess maybe I tell myself maybe he needed to give her some information. So he told her where he lives. I don't know.
Well, I mean, there's no way that Lila would stay with him after she saw where he lived. So she couldn't have been there physically.
No. I don't think she's been there.
Like, why couldn't they have done something about how, like, she had snooped through her dad's records and found his personnel file? Like, that feels believable to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So then then Nicholas, David, and Liz get to the apartment, but it's an apartment. Can you imagine the poverty and the shame? It's an apartment building and they don't know what number it's not a house.
And it's just like all these pointless little obstacles that they have to get past to get there. It just feels so contrived. It's like, okay, so first they don't know the address, then they call Lila, tells them, okay, then they go into an apartment, they don't know which one, or they can't get in. So finally they get in and they're like, well, let's just knock on every door. And then they ask some grumpy man, like, can you tell us? And he doesn't want to tell them. And then finally he tells them, and then they find it. It's like, okay. And then Jack has Jessica pinned down. He has a knife to her neck. And they're starting to knock down the door, and Jack's like, don't come in, or like I'm gonna like stab her or something. And Jessica's like, no, keep coming in, you're almost here. And then, I mean, this was wild what happened. Nicholas knocks down the door, right? But then
the dead-bolted door. So I already don't believe this, but okay.
And then Nicholas is fighting to wrest the knife from Jack's powerful grasp. In the struggle, Jessica breaks free. But Jack has the maniacal strength of several men. He makes wild slashing motions with his arm, catching Nicholas's shoulder with the tip of his knife. Nicholas's shirt was cut open, and a nasty red gash stained the white fabric. Spurred to action, Jessica forced herself to move back toward Jack. Taking careful aim, she let loose her strongest, best cheerleading kick, catching Jack in the arm. The knife flew out of his hand and landed several feet away on the tattered rug. And then basically they get Jack down, they get the knife away, everything's fine, safe, and good. And the game was finally up for Sweet Valley's Mysterious Prince. And I just love that little cheerleading move, I will say.
I love the cheerleading move. It felt a little Buffy the Vampire Slayer to me.
Oh, I thought you were going to say it felt also like when the guy randomly was like Taekwondo.
Oh, sure.
Who was that? It was the one who was the art school who did with the Betsy. The older guy from the Betsy. He was in her life drawing class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's very Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Like she's a cheerleader in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and yeah. I know it's not fruitful to go down this avenue, but like, what was Jack's plan? Like, was he gonna kill Jessica? And then what's he gonna do with her body? I know he's not thinking rationally.
I think we have to assume he wasn't thinking rationally and he sort of does these things. I don't know.
Okay.
We are now at the cliffhanger.
Well, so Jessica's at the police station. Ned comes up, and this interaction I thought was actually really cool. And you know I'm no Ned head. So Jessica says, I hope they lock Jack up and throw away the key. And potential future abolitionist king Ned Wakefield says, Jess, sweetheart, I know this has been a terrifying ordeal, and it's only natural to feel like you want to get even with Jack. But frankly, I think professional counseling might do a lot more for a troubled boy like that than putting him behind bars could.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Your father's right, Alice Wakefield put in. There are special places where they can treat people like Jack. Maybe if he'd gotten help sooner, this whole thing wouldn't have happened. Okay, Wakefields.
Again, maybe. Again, we don't really know the extent of his delusion versus whatever, but it's all a little bit hazy. But yeah, I mean, sure,
Yeah.
I wouldn't call him an abolitionist king. He definitely has put, even though I think we sometimes think is in estate law, sometimes real estate law. Sometimes I think we've also seen him be in family law because he was working on a divorce a few books ago. But he's also put people behind bars. He's put actually killers behind bars, and that sometimes get loose, and sometimes actually might want to come back for some revenge.
Stop.
And then,
Rebecca.
said too much.
Rebecca.
I said too much. Oh, come on, please. It's not telling you. That's literally not telling you anything. If it's on the back of the book, I'm allowed. If it's on the back of the book, I'm allowed to say it. If it's in the title, I'm allowed to say it.
Okay, I don't agree with that fundamentally, and I've never said no to that.
We have to do a cliffhanger.
Okay, we may have to do a lot of things. So we're at the police station, and everyone's attention is caught by the police radio blasting an urgent message through the station. Small aircraft in trouble, vicinity of Seca Lake. I repeat, small plane in trouble. Craft number BA329, rented to one George Warren. Elizabeth let out a horrified gasp. George and Enid, the ordeal was not over yet. Can George and Enid avert disaster? Find out in Sweet Valley High number 20, Crash Landing.
Thoughts, feelings, fears, hopes for
They're not gonna die.
So the next one's called Crash Landing, right?
Yeah, it's called Crash
Just
Landing,
saying.
right? I don't think they're gonna die.
So what do you hope? What do you imagine?
My thought is that this is going to be like Dion and Murray in Clueless when they accidentally get on the freeway and they almost die and their near-death experience keeps them closer together. I think he's gonna rekindle something with Enid because the high stress of this situation awakens something. They trauma bond. They're stronger than ever, and Robin is left out in the cold. Yes?
I mean, I can't say anything.
No, you can't. But
Do you want me to tell you? Do you
No!
want me to tell you in the right direction if you're hot or cold?
No!
Fine. No comment.
Okay. Well, what a lovely conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
As for Shredder, we knew we'd see him again. He's the bad penny that keeps turning up, the rotten apple that spoils the bunch, the moldy anchovy that ruins the pizza, the Donatello. Yeah, put a sock in it.
Thanks for listening to Sweet Valley Hive, hosted by Robert Marks and Rebecca Pardo. For more, check out our Instagram at Sweet Valley Hive. Theme song by Yessie and artwork by Elliot Carroll.